Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. We're here today with Malagor, the Dark Omen, and the Beastmen, going to be taking on some Ponzi High Elves, so let's go ahead and get straight to the army composition. You can see straight up front getting showered by some Sisters of Avalorn. I've got some Centaurs with throwing axes, 2 here and 2 here. Meanwhile, over here on the far side, we've got the Eye of Morslib Regiment of Renowned Cygor, which did get a bit more expensive in the last patch, but still very strong, supported by an Ungor Spearman herd. We've also got the Moo Cows here, the Butchers of Kalkengard, very strong Regiment of Renown, looking very cool with their dappled paint scheme and their utter belt buckles. I love it. Over here, we've got a couple more Ungor Spearman herd and some Centaurs with great weapons hidden in the woods here, waiting in ambush. Over in the far corner, we've got some Chaos Poison Warhounds. For my opponent's High Elf army, his army's going to be led by Tyrion. Pretty solid choice in this matchup. Looks like he's got all the goodies here on Tyrion, so Heart of Avalorn, Foe Seeker, Stand Your Ground, Faint Riposte, and Sunfang. His caster is going to be a Lore Master of Hoeth. Looks like he's got Spirit Leech, Melkos, Whistling's Wild Form, and Earthblood, as well as the Book of Hoeth here. Let me remind myself what that does. Blessed Tome, in fact, does +8 leadership. Infantry line, Scions of Mothlan, we've got one Swordmaster of Hoeth, one Pure Main Company, another unit of Spearmen, a couple of Lothern Sea Guard, the Everqueen's Court Guards, and another Sister of Avalorn. We've also got the Regiment of Renown, Illyrian Reavers, the Heralds of the Wind, super solid choice in this matchup. And yeah, let's get the battle underway. You can see Eye of Morslib whiffing a shot clean there on those Everqueen's Court Guards. We definitely did take some nasty damage on those Centaurs with throwing axes right out the gate. You will note the balance power is slightly in my favor, not quite as much as some other Beastmen games I played recently playing against the Beastmen, where the balance power was very far out of my favor, but this one seems to be a bit more even, although I do think the Beastmen balance power still needs some fine-tuning in terms of multiplayer, but we're going to make solid contact there with that Everqueen's Court Guards, and my opponent has discovered part of my ambush force here, but the rest of these forces are still hidden here. We're going to go ahead and exploit that, as my opponent's currently just marching towards my group here. Very nice Sunfang, just deletes that Ungor Spearman herd, but we're going to get in and do a bit of an alpha strike on these Sisters of Avalorn here. I actually missed the attack order slightly, but we are going to get the attack order in, and then also bring in the Sons of Goros as well. Since there was a gap here, we decided to just shoot that. We're also going to run these Ungor Spearman herd into trade with the Lothern Sea Guard in melee. Lothern Sea Guard are alright in melee. They definitely don't want to be trading against a low-tier spear unit like these Ungor Spearman herd. They'll definitely trade above their weight class. Probably still lose, but for some good value. Meanwhile, Tyrion made it all the way to the Eye of Morslib, but the Butchers of Kalkengard seeing him off. Meanwhile, the rest of the forces here are a little bit distracted by the fact that I've summoned another Cygor here from Malagor to chuck rocks at them point blank. We've also got the ambush coming in. Centaurs with great weapons doing a quick hit and run charge and then backing right out. We've got the Ungor Spearman herd kind of holding the line here. They'll obviously get carved up by Swordmasters, but they're meant to just hold them in place for a moment. Some brutal boulders just ripping through the Pure Main Company there. Those 2 boulders alone did a ton of shock damage, and you can see the back line. Those Sisters of Avalorn are completely gone. Centaurs with great weapons forming up for another hit and run here. We decided to chase these Heralds of the Wind away, and they're going to be caught momentarily by my Butchers of Kalkengard, and we're going to do a bit of a rear charge here with these Centaurs with great weapons, so we'll be able to get some solid damage in. Heralds of the Wind do pull away immediately, but we are going to get some hits in the meantime. You can see these Lothern Sea Guard, that's what they're called, getting inundated by the Butchers of Kalkengard. Although they do have spears, I'm fairly confident with their decent melee defense and regeneration, the Butchers will be just fine. They do have 60 melee defense, in fact, which is quite solid. You can see Eye of Morslib loading up for another shot there. We're obviously going to lose the infantry fight as expected, but as long as we can hold them in place to deliver enough shots with these rocks, we can do okay. These Swordmasters of Hoeth, rather, with the Lore Master, taking a brutal beating there, and a very nice Vile Tide coming down from Malagor right on top of those Everqueen's Court Guards, disrupting their firing. Looks like an Earthblood coming down from the Lore Master, but not quite going to be enough. The balance power tipped already very far in the Beastman's favor. Yeah, a little bit of friendly fire action coming in, but now the final Alpha Strike coming in with all these Centaurs and the Minotaurs and everybody working together. We've even got some of the Ungors in there as well, just running shop all over this elf line, trying to do as much shock damage as possible. Again, this build is very much built around hit and run and being very fast and aggressive and exploiting gaps and trying to kind of pull your opponent's formation apart. And we definitely succeeded in that aspect. Another Vile Tide going off, damaging those Spearmen a bit. At this point, it's just all sorts of chaos, no pun intended, of course. But yeah, Tyrion busy fighting. He summoned Cygor, which has already generated some pretty good value, 24 kills against some high-tier infantry. I have more Sleep's Guts. Excuse me, 68 kills, and that's against an army that was relatively small to begin with. You can see my opponent only had about 600 unit models to start, but we'll soak up some Moo Cow action as we finish things out here. The Scions of Mathlon trying to hold out, but it's a very desperate situation. And of course, the Butchers of Kalkangar do cause terror, of course, as well. So they're going to be terrifying away a lot of the elf units here. In fact, the terror has generally been a pretty big issue for the High Elves in this battle, which is not something you would normally think would be an issue for the High Elves. But at the end of the day, they actually don't have many units immune to psychology. And if you can do enough shock damage to do in their high leadership, then you can actually terrify them away pretty effectively. And of course the Beastmen excel at that hit and run shock damage stuff. So very fun battle. Hope you guys enjoyed. Not the closest battle by any means, but we'll talk about my opponent's build in a little bit here so I can give you guys some tips. There are some elements that I like from it, but I definitely would fine-tune a few things. Overall though, fun battle. It definitely showcased the mobility of the Beastmen quite well. In terms of the army breakdown here, 94 kills in the Eye of Morslave at the end of the day, quite decent. And the rest of the kills just spread pretty evenly. You can see Centaurs all picked up quite a few. The Throwing Axes kind of contributed. Chaos Poison Warhounds even did a little bit. Malagor himself racking up 8. Tyrion did quite well at 62, helped roast out some of those Ungor Spearmen herd, but then beyond that wasn't wildly effective. If he had been able to stay on that Eye of Morslave, it would have been good, but of course the Butchers of Kalkangar were there. My opponent's army was just a little bit too missile focused. He invested quite a few resources into infantry missiles, which I think is a big mistake against the Beastmen. And then he also had a relatively small elite infantry corps, which is definitely a risk when Cygors are on the field. They excel at deleting units of elite infantry, so it's definitely a risk to take something like a Swordmaster of Hoeth against the Beastmen. So in terms of what I like to do in this particular matchup, Tyrion can be a pretty solid lord choice, so I'm going to use him for this example, although I do think Alariel is perhaps arguably the more competitive choice. I'll talk about why in just a moment, but Tyrion himself up on the steed here. I honestly typically cut stand your ground just because elves have good melee defense and leadership anyway, so to save on costs, I'm going to cut that. Probably cut Foe Seeker as well because Tyrion's already very fast. I will take Sunfang and Heart of Avalorn, sure, why not? And then in terms of a caster, Loremaster of Hoeth can be pretty decent, but he's a little slow and he has Earthblood, but his spell selection beyond that, I mean, it's decent, but he doesn't have the same regeneration items. And personally, I just like another lore here, which is Lore of Life, just to go directly into the healing, not worry about any other spells, and just try and get as much value that way. So we're going to put her up on a horse and grab just Earthblood and Regrowth. These two items here, the increase to the recharge rate is less important, but the great increase to power reserve can definitely be worth it, so I might think about picking up the Starwood Staff if I have the extra points, but let's build our army first, as that's a secondary consideration. So how do I like to go against the Beastmen? Well, in my opinion, and this is true of a lot of matchups with the High Elves, at least in my paradigm, because elite infantry is such a big risk with Cygors, and they're very likely to go with a heavy mobility game, so bringing skirmishers is always a risk. In fact, this is kind of a rule of thumb with almost any faction playing against the Beastmen, at least for me, is that I don't bring infantry skirmishers or artillery at all. I bring only mounted skirmishers so that they can at least run away from the Centaurs in a pinch, and they can stay mobile and continue firing, or else I just don't bring any skirmishers at all and just go straight up, heads up, and try and just run at the Beastmen, which I think that a lot of factions, particularly with good heavy cavalry, can do. So let's talk a bit about the High Elves here. Heavy cavalry is definitely the focus I would go with in this matchup. So we've got 3 Dragon Princes here to provide some serious offensive power, and this is why you want to bring Lore of Life to protect and heal these Dragon Princes. Heralds of the Wind, definitely like them in this matchup. We're going to actually grab 3 more Illyrian Reaver Archers because I like them so much in this matchup. Again, they don't require as much protection as infantry skirmishers. They do require more micromanagement, of course, because you need to stay on top of ordering them, and since they move faster, it does require more micro. But I do think that this particular paradigm is a bit stronger. And then we're going to go, obviously, very light on infantry because we don't have much in the way of points. So we're only able to afford about 3 units of spearmen here. And yeah, that's going to be our army. So a very small army, pretty micro-intensive, but yeah, it has the ability to go super wide on mobility and really gain map control because, for example, with the build I brought, I really didn't have answers to 3 Dragon Princes. I mean, I could have tried and force some favorable engagements to use the throwing axes, but again, I'm stressing more on my micro on the Beastman side, trying to deal with the Dragon Princes than you are perhaps using them. Of course, things like Minotaurs with great weapons, the Butchers of Kalkengard themselves can be a pretty substantial risk. But personally, the main reason why I would advocate for using Alarielle over Tyrion in this matchup is that she gives you your caster, your healer, essentially, and Lord in one package for about the same price as Tyrion. You can see Tyrion, how I've kitted him out here, is 2,200. If we grab Alarielle in here instead, put her up on her Eagle, because, of course, Beastmen don't have many flying units outside of Harpies, and even then, I think Alarielle probably has the combat stats to deal with some Harpies. So we're going to grab, in this matchup, Banishment, just in case the Beastmen go infantry heavy to deal with a whole bunch of Bestigors, or you could take Arcane Unforging. Those would be the 2 I'd recommend in this matchup to pair with Earthblood, and then we're also going to grab the Star of Averlorn and the Shieldstone of Isha for the additional physical resistance and the additional healing, of course. The main reason why you would bring Alarielle. And again, 2,200 points, pretty close in terms of cost. That allows us to cut this mage with the Lore of Life and then bring something else. So we've got 1,000 points to play with here, so you could potentially bring 2 more units of Spearmen. We could do something like this where we upgrade a unit of Spearmen, get a unit of Spearmen and then upgrade one of these Dragon Princes to the Fireborn. Because these guys have flaming attacks and anti-large, they are a hard counter to the Butchers of Kalkengard. Granted, they'll trade pretty atritiously. They're going to take some damage in that fight, but with Alarielle healing them, potentially, given that Star of Averlorn especially, they can definitely be very tanky. So something like this, I think, would probably be a little bit stronger against the Beastmen, but let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Hope this battle and theory crafting were helpful. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thank you once again for watching, and we'll see you next time.